Hey guys, so this is another prep update. I believe this is episode 3. Um, I want to give you just a brief update regarding my prep. So I have currently hired back on my coach Jagger. He is the USPA drug tested national champion in the 220 pounds weight class. He's super freaking strong. He's smart as hell. He's had experience with learning under Dr. Mike Israetel, getting his undergraduate in exercise science, and he's had experience as an intern for Chad Wesley Smith, who's one of the most prestigious strength and conditioning coaches and powerlifting coaches specifically in the entire world. He's actually the founder of Juggernaut Training Systems, which is a pretty popular powerlifting YouTube channel and programming for programmer. But yeah, I'm working with him. We have a plan. I'm giving him lots of feedback regarding what I want based off of past training experience. And right now we are currently in a hypertrophy focused mesocycle that's going to be designed at, hopefully putting on a few, grams of muscle. But mostly it's going to be with developing a large work capacity with squat, bench, and deadlift specifically to translate over into potentiating future strength gains and peaking well, especially when I move into squat, bench, and deadlift days, which are pretty draining. But I want to talk about the biggest issue that I see most intermediate to and beginner powerlifters make, and that is too early a specialization / focusing on just doing strength training all the time and just hammering in the heavy compound lifts, the squat, bench, and deadlift over and over again. And this is largely because they see what are the top guys doing, like Dan Green, Larry Wheels, those types of people. And while they are doing very highly specific work, there's a reason. And the reason why is because they're already really freaking jacked. This is important to understand because all else being equal, a bigger muscle has more potential to be a stronger muscle. So because these guys have already maxed out their weight classes in powerlifting in terms of body composition, power to weight ratio, the whole idea behind weight classes in powerlifting and what you want to do is be the most jacked you possibly can be, while the leanest that you can be, that to the point that doesn't interfere with your recovery. Thus being able to move the most weight because of the relationship between size and strength. It's pretty linear. Basically, if you can teach a bigger muscle to be strong and to have more neuromuscular efficiency and motor learning, you're going to be able to be really freaking strong, all else being equal. And these guys are already pretty jacked, pretty lean. I'll pop up a picture on the screen right here of an example, but they're all really big dudes. And so for them, they don't need to focus on doing volume work. They really just need to focus on neuromuscular efficiency and refining their technique and getting stronger and using 1 to 5 rep ranges. However, with more intermediate and beginners, they really need to focus on putting on lots of muscle. And this is because this is one of the only things that you actually can change. There are certain things that do affect strength. It's multifactorial. There's muscle origins and insertions, and what this may impact is what technique will allow you to lift the most weight. But you can't really change them unless you have surgery, changing where your muscles originate and insert. There's also motivation, arousal, and fatigue. However, these are all just acute factors, and learning how to mitigate fatigue and manage arousal are good skills to acquire, but they have kind of more to do with how much you can lift today rather than your long-term strength potential. You have motor learning and neuromuscular efficiency as well. While it is possible that training more frequently could lead to quicker mastery, but if you're going to be training the power lifts, which are relatively simple movements for years and years, that technical mastery is going to come with practice as long as you're lifting heavy things at least somewhat frequently, which is around at least once per week for most people. You also have body segment lengths, and these are similar to muscle origins and insertions, but these may affect technique to a certain degree. But again, you're going to have to play the hand that you're dealt genetically. And the same thing goes with muscle fiber types, but they also don't really have too much for powerlifting. They also don't really matter that much for powerlifting anyways. So all we're really left with is muscle size. And so this is really the only factor you're going to be able to change in a major way in the long run, except for motor learning and neuromuscular efficiency. However, the latter pretty much takes care of itself via practice lifting heavy weights. And that's what I'll do in my strength and my peaking cycles. Muscle size increases pretty much any type of strength training as well. but it's clear that there are techniques. There are techniques that are more or less effective for building size, and that's not maximal sets of 1 to 5. So my recommendation for most people is to really focus on periods when you are developing your strength, when you're in that early beginner intermediate stage, is have periods of training where you are focused on gaining lots of muscle. And there are basically 2 general training setups that you want to have. But before I go into that, I want to give you some general recommendations. For starters, the weight class that you start in might not be your best long-term weight class, because the weight class you're going to be the most competitive in is going to be the one where you're carrying as much muscle, and muscle mass per unit height is the key factor here, in terms of how much muscle that you can have. So basically, taller people can probably have more muscle because they have more tendon, more body to fill out the muscle, and as little fat as possible. If you've only been training for a year or two, the weight class you're in right now is probably not the weight class that you should wind up in the long term. You may be more competitive in a lighter class now, but if you stay there while you still have potential to grow more muscle, such as in early, intermediate, beginner stage of lifting, you're probably going to limit yourself in the long run in terms of how much stronger you can really get. And now, as far as general training setups for this, I would recommend one of 2 options. And this is, the first is more of what I do, and then the second one is going to be more of like what a Sean Noriega does, and whatnot, in terms of with like their approach. But none of these is necessarily wrong. It really just depends on the individual athlete. But the first is going to be block periodization, which is set up with the bulk of the year spent effectively doing a bodybuilding style of training, hitting each muscle or movement 2 to 3 times per week, focusing on sets of 5 to 10 for your main lifts, sets of 8 to 15 for accessory lifts, and doing 6 to 10 sets per muscle group each time that you train it in each session. Don't be attached to the barbell for your bodybuilding style training either. Obviously, it's smart to keep practicing the competition variety of lifts, but there's nothing wrong with using dumbbells or machines for hypertrophy work. And there could be a very good argument saying that they could even be better, allowing for longer range of motion, more constant tension on the muscles, and less fatigue for that exercise relative to the stimulus. And then you can take 6 to 8 weeks before handling heavier loads and develop confidence with the weight and the skill of lifting near max and at maximal loads, such as, this is more or less the approach that I'm using for my meet. The alternative way is to train your main lifts like a powerlifter and your accessories like a bodybuilder. What this would look like is, farther out from your meet, just do 1 to 3 sets of 2 to 5 reps for your main lifts per workout. So that way you can spend more time and energy on your accessory lifts and train bodybuilding style with 6 to 10 sets per muscle group per session with 8 to 15 reps per muscle or movement. Then over 6 to 8 weeks, when you're 9 to 12 weeks out from a meet, you can gradually shift the emphasis towards your main lifts, eventually doing 4 to 8 sets of 2 to 5 reps, still leaving probably about a rep or 2 in the tank on each set, while cutting your accessory work in half. Then you can take 2 to 4 weeks to peak, which is basically handling heavier loading but less volume on your main lifts to dissipate that fatigue and maximize the technical and neuromuscular efficiency and the qualities of strength with little to no accessory work, or to minimize that fatigue once you lead up to your meet. And once you train like this for a few years, you build a solid muscular base, then it might be wise to transition to more of a height-specific Shiko or Norwegian setup to increase specificity and ensure the bulk of your training volume is devoted to adding mass in the most specific manner possible to maximizing strength in squat, bench, and deadlift. Not the most efficient, though that would be as much of a concern, since you should be nearing your muscular potential by that point once you're more late intermediate to early advanced. The whole moral of the story is that if you focus on growth, the strength will take care of itself, provided you train with heavy loads occasionally, especially leading up to your meets. If you focus purely on heavy strength work while neglecting the volume necessary to maximize hypertrophy, you will be limiting yourself in the long run. The bulk of your time in the gym should be focused on growth, at least until you're nearing your muscular potential. The line between bodybuilder and powerlifter should be drawn at the point of competition, with this distinction being much hazier as far as training methods go, except for the very elite. So I hope this video was helpful. If you guys did like it, please make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. If you guys are interested in coaching or programs, then click the link in my bio, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one, and prep will continue. Bye.